BS3 Network, changing the way you watch TV.
All right. Welcome back, family.
Dysfunctional.
Yeah, just a little bit profane, a little burp with the cough. Dysfunctional. Welcome back, family. I'm so excited just to be back in the space today. Excited about all the people that have been tuning in. We're gonna give a few minutes since I was a little eager and I started a few minutes early. Let everybody come on, get a few people on there on the digits, but we're not worried about what those tallies and those numbers look like. This is about the information. This is about the revolution. This is about what God has called forth in this season. And I'm excited just to be used by him in this way, you guys. So today we really get started. Today we tap into the meat, y'all. Today we begin the process of looking at how we got here. That thing y'all saw me keep posting over and over again for months, unknowingly so, to the point where y'all just kept ignoring it. So maybe this will get ignored too, but I'm gonna keep putting it out there because the truth is the truth. And I got to set it loose. So glad to be back in here today. This is Pastor Joe, a.k.a. the Profane Prophet, host of the Dysfunctional Disciple podcast. It is a Thursday, and today is a beautiful day, you guys. Today is my brother and my sister's birthday. So I want to give a shout out to the twins, Sean and Shonda. Happy birthday. Y'all getting a little older. I ain't going to tell y'all age live on this show, but I will say y'all getting up in age. So I want to say happy birthday to the twins. I love y'all, appreciate you. Truly my day ones, the only kids that were here when I got here. So truly my day ones, and I just love them to life, man. So after that, it is a gloomy day outside, May the 21st, you guys, but it's a great day that the Lord has made, and so we're going to rejoice and be glad in it. I ain't going to hold you up a whole long time, you guys. Today is about the meat, and we got a number of videos we're going to be playing. Today we'll be discussing sinners in the hand of an angry God. Sinners in the hand of an angry God. I thought I'd give y'all a little something, a little background music just to play back there, that ominous drop. That's one of the songs I did, but it'll probably be the last one that y'all actually hear. So today, sinners in the hand of an angry God, 5 clips today. What are the foundations of religion that we have received? How do they line up with the fundamental precepts of God? How may we be in this season out of alignment? Because as we look and begin to measure, which everything this show is about measurement. How can we quantify the growth that was supposed to occur as we look through the lens of child development always and begin to think about how dysfunctional disciples were made? Many of the statements that were made over the last couple of weeks as I was doing the show, I've kind of been spitting out stats and saying something like 70 to 80% of our kids leaving by the time they graduate high school and only 30% coming back. Those are numbers that should rattle us to our core. And there's some other numbers that are out there, but because we weren't paying attention to the 70 and the 80 that were leaving, we're missing the rest of the numbers as well. And so how do we measure what has gone on in childhood discipleship over, honestly, a broad scope of time? We're going to be looking at least the last 30, 50, 60 years, kind of looking at where we were then, where we are now, what our habits are, what the outcomes are, what are the ways that we can measure this deficit that is clearly in our children. George Barna, who is considered one of the leading researchers on the church, declared a little while ago that this is the most biblically illiterate generation ever. And so if it's biblically illiterate, what happened? Who didn't hand down the faith correctly? And if we were dealing with a biblical illiterate generation one generation ago, 2 generations ago, then what does that say about the current generation? And how do we then have expectations of many of our children, of foundations that were not laid, and then look at them and through much of the rhetoric and many of the things online begin to point and punch down on our children? And I talk to a lot of youth and young adults that have either left the church or on the verge of leaving, and they feel that weight. They hear it from the pulpit, you guys. They hear it in the general tone of the generations that are above them through parents and elders and those that are supposed to be sowing light and love. And so how did we get here to where we find ourselves looking at our children as the answer for the problem, as opposed to looking at ourselves. That is what the dysfunctional disciple is about. That is the bulk of it, you guys. But we'll continue to break it down and look at these things historically, and then we'll look at some current events, and we'll kind of come together and ask some questions about how they fit. Often we'll be looking through a lens of culture, and so today we have 3 movie clips from the movie Sinners that we're going to look at. We've got a couple of Facebook clips that we're going to look at. And then we have a sermon that we're going to start off with. Before we go any further, it is the title sermon of today's show, Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God. This sermon was one of the most, or maybe even today, maybe still the most famous sermon ever preached here in America. It was preached by one Jonathan Edwards, who was a Puritan and considered one of the foremost theologians in the country. And this sermon is supposed to be directly responsible for sparking the first Great Awakening. This was a revival that, when you study church history, there were 2 Great Awakenings. You guys, they say we're waiting on the third. But as we look at this sermon and look at some roots and go back, we're going to ask some questions. And so we want to look first at these 2 clips. We're going to look a little bit, listen to a little bit, because it's someone else that is relaying Jonathan Edwards' sermon, which there are many online. If you want to go and check them out, you can see for yourself. But these are roots, you guys. So if you'll take the time to listen today and get that big picture, then you'll begin to kind of see where I'm going and some of the things that we're dealing with. So Jonathan Edwards is our first one, Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God. And this is a reading version by someone else. Let me share my screen here shortly. I'm learning and still working on dealing with all of my functions here. I got a lot of gadgets to deal with. I'm grateful for the platform that I'm here on and what it allows me. And so big up King Dog. Big up to Ben Sutter, the owners of the BS3 network, and individuals that I'm grateful to call partners in this thing called the Dysfunctional Disciple Podcast. And so you can see down below how you like, how you follow, how you share, all of those things that are coming. We have an app that is on iTunes, the iTunes platform and the Google platforms, and you can get it on your Roku TV. We are changing the way you watch TV. And so this is a piece of that. Now that I have the business out of the way, let's get down to the meat today. Let's jump over here and let's take a look at what my man Jonathan Edwards has to say as we begin this conversation. After that, I'll have an opening monologue, a poem that I wrote, and then we'll watch the other video as we continue to roll forward. So here's a screen share for you guys. We're going to look a little bit at the sinners in the hand of an angry God and listen to a little bit. We're not going to share all, we're not going to listen to all of it, you guys. That's Mr. Jonathan Edwards, Puritan, founder of Foundation and an open slave that were going on here in America. So this is a piece. Now, if y'all paying attention, you heard him compare the way we crush a worm or crush something small here on the earth to the way God crushes us as well. It's the good news, y'all. That's a lot of these and theirs and thus. The old King James.
Congregation that it may be are at ease and quiet than he is with many of those that are now in the flames of hell. Unconverted men walk over the pit of hell on a rotten covering.
I ain't gonna make
And
y'all
there
listen
are
too much.
innumerable
I want you to
places
go
in
watch it on
this
your own. I've
covering
watched the
so
whole thing
weak
at least this.
that they won't bear their weight. And these places are not seen. The arrows of death fly unseen at noonday. The sharpest sight can't discern
We're gonna
them.
fast forward a little bit.
God has so many
before I cut him
different,
off.
unsearchable ways of taking wicked men out of the world and sending them to hell that there is nothing to make it appear that God had. He is of purer eyes than to bear to have you in his sight. You are 10,000 times so abominable in his eyes as the most hateful, venomous serpent is in ours.
I think that's enough. I think we're gonna let my man go. I think you can get the point of the sermon. I think as you look at that, you're able to kind of catch the tone of the sermon and realize that this, although it was responsible for starting the Great Awakening and is given that credit and still today studied, Mr. Jonathan Edwards, in many seminaries all around America, in spite of his past, in spite of the revelations he didn't have while he was having these great revelations from God. I heard one individual say that part of the reason why he had time to ponder and sit out staring at the stars and the moon and all of that and think so deeply about God was because he had those servants that were back there, those slaves that were back there on his plantation that were doing the work for him and that allowed him so much thinking time. I'm not going to get into it, but I heard that as I was studying through and listening to the different thoughts of different seminarians and scholars as we were going through this. And so you see, like foundationally, this is where we started at with that mindset, the idea that we were lowly worms, we were lowly maggots, that God was looking down on us and that we were not fit to be seen by God. Right? The idea is rooted in and wrapped in scripture, but it misses a key piece, especially for the believers, which is the idea that we are supposed to be covered in the blood to the day of redemption, which means that our God no longer sees our sin now in this season. He sees the blood, the covering of our perfect atoning sacrifice, Yeshua. So we see Christ as the redeeming figure in this, but when you listen, if to the full sermon, you'll hear more rage than good news. So some people might not like that take on it, but as I've listened to it, and it is memorialized, you guys, this is one of the most famous sermons ever. People study it and they look at it, and they look at it with great revere because they revere those great awakenings and think about the spiritual revivals that occurred here in America, right? And some of their family members may have come through those revivals, and so there's history that's there. But often when we are looking at the nostalgic history, we can tend to overlook the real history. Right? The history on the ground, not just the history that's making one version or one piece of that equation feel better, but how do we measure up to the very book that we're standing on? So as we look at the conditions of the country right now, we look at the state of religion, we look at the state of the family, education, all these things, we were built on a foundation, you guys. And much of that foundation, as we have heard over and over again, as we prepare to celebrate the 250th anniversary of America, is built on these Judeo-Christian values. And so if we are built on those Judeo-Christian values, and if that is our claim to freedom, then that means that the Bible then becomes our inspector on whether or not we are lining up with those values, because that is the book that we use here and that many have used over thousands of years. Those collected manuscripts that was binded together, right, into those final 66 books that we see now and that we deal with here in our Western spaces, 88 books when you get to the fullness of them. And those are other conversations we'll have down the line when we talk about canonization and how it came together and all of that stuff. I promise we're going to get to some meat, but I'm going to try to keep it at a level where you can understand it very clearly, right? So we're going to weave the movies in and out and a bunch of the cultural stuff, because these are spaces where we've already encountered these thoughts. And so now that we know this was the foundation, and if we go back further than that, which we will, then we'll know that foundational element, some of that anger, some of those things were there before. I'm so mad. One of my favorite books, and I can't find it right now. It is by William James Jennings, you guys, and I'm going to look up the book. I'm going to post it here in a minute so you can at least see the cover of the book. and be able to go and get it yourself, because this book was eye-opening to me. It was one of the beautiful things that God allowed me to read while I was at Truist Seminary, and it's talking about the Christian imagination, right? How we're able to believe, how we're able to conceive God. And in one of those chapters, early on, it tells a story right after, you guys, and then I'm gonna go into the opening monologue in the second clip. It tells a story about right after the Pope commissioned and sanctioned colonialism, which was done by papal bull. And again, we'll go through, I'll present all of these documents and stuff as I'm showing you. Today is just an overview. Next week, we're going to get into the scripture that refutes some of this stuff. And we're also going to get into some of those primary source documents as well. So don't just tune in next week. This is a 2-week episode. You're going to need to get both to get the full picture. But the clips will be out there, and you got plenty of time because it'll always be available on my page. But when you go back after that split, right, by the papal bull, and this idea of the sanctioning of breaking up the world into two pieces, and the church telling then at that time, Spain and Portugal, that they could sail, and that these were the dividing marks, and this side is yours, the other side, now go conquer in the name of the Lord. Those were the instructions. It was the idea that they were going to get savages, right? They were going to get those that were unsaved before they ever touched foot on these lands, without understanding any of their original dialects, without recognizing the concepts that they had of God. The Pope, from his seat, gave a commission that said they could go split up the world, and colonialism began way before Christopher Columbus in 1492 and that we learned about. And so when we look at this, we've got to look at that realistically and recognize that the church sanctioned war. And it wasn't the first time. We'll go back again, but not today. I just want to lay that out there as foundation, because William James Jennings, in his book, The Christian Imagination, writes about one of those first slave ships that pulled up on the Port of Lagos, y'all, in Nigeria. And so they find themselves down there. They're marching these indigenous Africans who are there. They are now taken into slavery. They were not slaves. They were being taken into slavery. Some of them were prisoners or in the country, which was normal to trade those, all of that kind of stuff. But the idea of chattel slavery at the time did not even exist. So as they're marching and they're coming in their chains, bound at their wrist and bound at their feet, and they're marching, they're coming in, and here is Zavala, the actual chronicler, the individual that's chronicling the Prince of Portugal as he goes through this place, right? Because Spain had the other side of the world. That's how they ended up in Mexico and Brazil and all of those spaces, right? So we know these things now just historically based on how the lands are laid out. But when he was there, he's sitting on his steed, on his horse, he's riding, so is the prince, and he sees these individuals that they're getting ready to take into captivity begin to raise their hands high in the sky and begin to wail and cry out to God. And in that moment, the point that I'm sitting in seminary listening to, and obviously interjected and kind of talked about how ironic it was that in that moment, he said these savages are reaching up and crying out to an unknown God. A, as if they didn't know their God, even the way he said it, even though B, it was a reality that they didn't know their God. But they said they were reaching up, and even in the middle of their bondage, even in the middle of their worst space, while they were getting ready to be chained, and they didn't know it, for the next 250, 300 years, where their family perpetually would live in bondage. In that moment, they were reaching up, crying out to God, and the one saving them called them a savage. Those are our foundations, y'all. This is knowledge. This is stuff that people pay to go get. You go to seminary, but it should be available to all of us. You shouldn't have to read in selective libraries. You shouldn't have to get into certain spaces. If we're going to understand the roots of our faith, where it came from, how we walk with it, and I'm still very much an Orthodox Christian in the sense that all of my beliefs fit inside of everything that I was taught during my time inside of the church. But I do not see through the same lens of many of the people that have read those same books and understood them. I do see differently. And so much of this podcast is about how those things are different. They're out of line with some of the precepts of God, you guys. And I've had 1,000 conversations, and I don't say that, facetiously. I mean, in the 12,000 rides of Uber that I've done over the last 10 years, I've had at least 1,000, if not maybe thousands, with individuals of all races, all creeds, all hues. And as I talk to them about that, I don't care who I'm talking to. The clarity came in. The reason why I knew I had to launch this is because everybody was able to understand this is out of line. And if you look at it and measure the beginnings and begin to look at where we're currently at, which is where with our kids dropping out, right? Missional issues on the ground with individuals that will not receive this word because they see it through a white man's religion and as a white man's religion and through a white man's lens. And so there's so much resistance, and you can't come to God in resistance. You have to come to God in submission. And so before we even get to present good news to many of the people that we're trying to speak to, we already have a blinded eye that is on many of them because they're blinded by things that are present in their current pain that they're feeling in and that have not been reconciled from the past that nobody dealt with. And so we're going to measure, we're going to mourn, and then we're going to move these things. We're going to measure, look back, and although I'm looking back now, you know, a good 700 years with all of it going back to the paper bull, right? I'm truly going to focus in on the last 50 years, you guys. That is where we will be putting the meat of our discussions because, again, it's about the emerging generations, the children that they're raising, the faith that did not get passed down, the reasons it did not get passed down, how the faith we did receive changed us, and how it's keeping us from being able to share that well with our children. Because those of y'all that are out there, we've had conversations, and you know, and I know our babies are in a bad way. So this is not about anybody's feelings. It's not about any of those kind of things, you guys. I'm a very emotional guy. I cried before. I'll probably cry again. Some of this information I'm presenting should make you cry. But since it's not making anybody cry, I'm going to keep crying loud and sparing not until somebody hears that what we've done has to be reconciled with so that we can go forward. You can't move forward in the same energy that got you there. And these undisclosed realities, these this faith that we have that we are illiterate on and that many of us don't know well enough to feel like we can give it away to our children. This was another book that George Barna wrote on children's ministries. And he did surveys then, and it said that 70-something% of parents do not feel comfortable discipling their children. So if the family was the first institution, that means that we have outsourced a faith that God designed us to give away to our children, to those who are professional, to those who hold a vocation, that job I was in for the last 20 years. And the truth is that our faith is much more intimate than that. And while the church should be a supporting guard and a training area for families so that they can go back and live out their faith 6 days a week, we cannot find ourselves in a situation where the church or the school, which we're going to deal with later, is doing the majority of the educating and parents have their hands held back as if they aren't responsible. Because newsflash, while I'm talking about the church repenting, I'm talking about parents repenting too. Because many of the things that we are claiming ignorance on, it is not ignorance. It was a choice of where we put our time and our priorities, and all of us are guilty with that. Our children are the most precious thing that God gives us. The opportunity to co-create with God, to be a part of life, you guys, and the development of life, and for God to trust you enough to let you steward over his greatest creation, all creation, right? But his greatest creation, which was those who are made in his image, image bearers. And for us to take that lightly, or to not be invested enough to give them great foundations in the areas that we say are our greatest foundation, which is those of family life and religious life, right? And so if we look today at almost all of the issues, and we will go into the ACEs score next week and all that stuff, I'll get a chance to show you that. Today, we're strictly going to deal with the thought of religion, this idea that back when you would look at The Lion King, right, which is the greatest movie of all time, mind you, don't argue with that, the greatest villain song of all time as well. Your man Scar was off the chain, even though he was a menace. And I know many men like that, and I've been that man in my life, right? He was a menace, but his greatest villain song ever, hands down, no doubt, right? But in that movie, you learn about a good king and a bad king, which is what we see when we go back, and it's almost interchangeably in the book of Kings and in Chronicles as we go back and forth with the children of Israel and their story. It's always one good king, one bad king, right? And so we see that juxtaposition inside of the Lion King. But when his son is born, he takes his son, and there's communal celebration, and everybody comes together. You know, all those things that we do when we're doing your baby dedication and all these things that we do and come together. And he lifts his son up, and he tells his son, you know, he shows his son God, the only thing greater than him. We know that we have an image of this in Roots, right? That goes back where this Kunta Kinte was raised up by his father and told, behold, the only thing greater than you. The idea that since God made me in his image, there will be no man whatsoever in any likeness or any form or any fashion that will ever be greater than me. That my God, who loved me enough to say I was fearfully and wonderfully made in his image. Now, that does not mean that I cannot follow authority, because I should. Because even when Kunta's father raised him up, he still expected his son to follow, but he was showing his son a bigger principle. That many of our young people, in their lack of confidence today and their lack of self-esteem, do not recognize the complexity of their design, how much God loved them, and how great and powerful designed to be. And so many of them live in consistent states of depression, and they medicate and they deal with a lot of things, and we see suicide and so many other things on the rise, and some get it out with anger, and some simply drop out and isolate. But many of them are going through internally, and because of the way that our religious system has been set up, which has been rooted in a lot of shame, you guys, and a lot of this idea of corrective discipline, as opposed to preparing you for identity, right? The idea that most of my energy is spent on correcting the youth rather than training the youth, when the Bible told us to train them, and when they get older, they won't depart. But we find ourselves more corrective in our energy today. And because of that, many of our children don't feel comfortable talking to us. I've gone through seasons with all of my children, right? I'm grateful that in this season, more are talking to me than not, even though not all, right? That where we all go through these things as parents, where because of the word we're putting down, they not picking up what we're putting down. There's a disconnection. And a lot of the times, it's not simply that daddy was right, even though there are many situations where I thought I was right. But right and right now are not the same thing. There were ways in some of those moments I've had to learn, because I come from the Loud family, that everything can't be solved with an argument and yelling. Everything cannot be solved with a stern hand and with discipline. And what I recognized, the same dysfunction that I came from and the same dysfunction I was passing down was the same dysfunction that was being used in the discipleship cycle. That instead of many of my parents and the people that come from dysfunctional places like I come from, y'all seen that clip that goes around, says when they sent the baby home and it was time to do their mathematics, that when they get the problem wrong the first time, a black parent just says it louder the next time. Well, I come from that. If we didn't know how to train, if we didn't know how to teach, if we ourselves were simply surviving and getting by, then many individuals have been raised under adults who did not know how to rear them as children, right? They were raised under adults that did not know how to rear them as children. And so many foundational pieces was missing. But rather than the parent often in that situation saying, hey, I was incomplete when I got you. I was a child when I had you. My life was still upside down. There were things that I didn't know. And we should go back and learn those things together. That type of humility is very rarely expressed. Instead, many of our parents, especially if you'll go back and begin to poke at generational wounds, because to say that they didn't learn it is to say their parents didn't teach it to them. And to say that their parents didn't teach it to them is now putting an onus on a space that we hold near and dear in a reflective, nostalgic way. And even though I'm not disrespecting the elder, but yet calling to attention that thing that needs to be changed, often this conversation in dysfunctional families, that's where the fight starts. So I don't know about y'all in those functional families. Maybe y'all sit down and work it out. But in a dysfunctional family, you can get into a fight for pointing back at generations before. And all I'm saying is, you guys, for the last 20-something years in the church, I've noticed the same thing. As our children begin to say, hey, that wasn't right. Hey, Deacon them used to do this. Hey, these people was doing that. Hey, these things they hurt me. Church hurt has been something that the church fundamentally and primarily has dismissed, because they simply say the people don't know or don't understand or aren't understanding. And so I've heard a lot of pastors now talk about the weight that pastors carry, which is real. And pastors leave the church every month, just like the parishioners do, which is real. That weight is there. But when we look at the biblical call for accountability. It starts with the pastor. It starts with the institution. It starts with the organization. It does not start with those members, and sure not those kids. And so how do we shift that conversation so that we can begin to open up doors for better conversations with our young people? And that's my primary mission. That's my opening rant. Time for the next video. So we saw the angry guy. Now I want to bring it into the Sinners movie, you guys, and let you walk with me. This is me, Preacher Boy. And so y'all know something about this movie since it has been so popular, you guys, over the last year. A lot of think pieces have gone up about it. I don't claim to be some expert that's going to give you something so much better than all these other people. But what I can tell you is that I am clear. I am clear. Oh, I didn't stop the screen sharing before. Sorry about that, y'all. I told you I'm learning to operate this thing. Yeah. So I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to watch Meet Preacher Boy. We're going to look at his interaction, where he was coming from, the ideas he was being shaped in, right? We're going to kind of pick apart this video just for a few minutes because we got a few more that I want to show, and I don't want to hold you guys long, and we're halfway through the night. Thank y'all for joining me again. Y'all, can I tell you one more time how grateful I am for everybody that's taking the time to listen in even a little bit? It means the world to me. So here we go, Preacher Boy.
Somebody take me.
You strumming that guitar tonight?
Good morning, Miss Beatrice.
You gonna tell me what you playing on? Like I have to hear it through the grapevine.
You have a good one, Beatrice. I see you at service tomorrow morning.
Guess the grapevine it is.
Morning, Ma.
Morning, baby. Don't put that on your body, Samuel.
My soap is soap.
It'll dry you out.
I'll put this on while it's still wet.
Boy, you ain't got the sense God gave a goose. Oh!
Hey, Mama said get up.
This man picking cotton on a Sunday morning before church, y'all.
Morning, Pop.
You up off early, son?
Like you say, jump on the work. Don't let the work jump on you.
That's right.
Finish my quota for the day.
Yeah, I brought it in here. I want you to help me give my sermon tomorrow.
He's trying to get to the junk joint.
First
Daddy
Corinthians
trying to keep him from
10,
going.
13. Read.
No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you're tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Now, Pop, if you don't mind, I'm going to be late.
Late for what, boy? Where you got to be that's more important than being in the house of God?
I've been working all week, Pop. Want to be free of all this for a day.
To play music? For drunkards? Philanderers who shirk their responsibilities to their families so they can sweat all over each other?
I'll be back in town for service in the morning.
Son? You keep dancing with the devil. One day it's gonna follow you home.
Hey, little cousin, come on out. Got $2 out here waiting on a dime.
Samuel.
Oh, don't you worry now, Uncle Jed. We're gonna get them back to you in one piece.
Yeah. So all of us are familiar, right, with this scene and with how powerful it ended up being in the overall. And we're gonna get to the later scene. We're gonna get to the later scene and what happened. So in this is a common thing that happens with so many of our young people. But in this situation, this specific stuff that's going on. First off, you see that the conditions. Pop is a preacher. But here it is that his son is still out in the field. His son is still picking cotton. So are all of the other family members. And cotton ain't no joke. Those of y'all that have never actually picked a piece of cotton, the different thorns and the way that thing poke you, not to mention how itchy that cotton is. I got a chance to do it for a very small period of time, you guys, just passing by. My grandmother used to tell me stories about picking bales of cotton and peaches and all of the work that went into it and how laborious it was. So here was this young man that had worked all week. He's living in a tough world and he's looking for release that he's not clearly getting in the church. That's a harder conversation to have, right? He said he wanted to be free. And so here he was a preacher's son, and whom the son sets free is free indeed. But here he was living in the reality of the change of his actual physical presence, right? While Pop is preaching about a God who done liberated him and set him free. And I know y'all got to know that there would be some issues, right, inside of the soul of that man. And we have struggled because his daddy gave him something that he already knew. He gave him a prescription, right? And the scripture should be our prescription, but not when it's given at a surface level. There was a soul cry that was coming from that boy that daddy did not know how to answer. And he had to jump off the porch like many people in dysfunction have and get skint up just to recognize how serious it was out there in them streets. His daddy told him, you keep playing with the devil, sooner or later he gonna follow you home. And so many of our children, because they couldn't hear us, you guys, y'all can testify, many people have fallen off, had to come back. Many individuals have gotten in trouble, had to come back. Matter of fact, when I talk about those 70 to 80% of the kids that leave, they say only about 30% of them make it back. But if we want to be real, that 30% that make it back, they like me. They come in as a tattered bride, all beat up, bruised, and toe up. Done been out there, toe up from the flow up, and probably done some extra throw. You know what I'm saying? They not doing well. When they come back in, mind, heart, and sometimes even body is all out of alignment because they've given themselves to the world, right? And now they're coming back for the refuge of the church, which is very real, and that community is supposed to be real. But how do we receive them when they come back? I'm grateful for the hug and embrace that his daddy gave him. We'll show it later. But how do we receive those who were rightfully feeling chained in the space that they were in, right? And that we didn't have a soul answer for. We gave them a surface answer, not a soul answer. And so they found themselves out there in those same streets, skint up. I'm talking about our babies that was in the church. I'm talking about our babies that were in our home. I'm talking about our babies that were in these spaces. I'm talking about me before I ever talk about you. I've wrestled with this thing for real, y'all. My life ain't been no crystal stair. You hear me? So even when y'all saw me smiling and loving, and although annoying if you started talking theology and where these kids at today, but most of the time you see me giving away light and love. You see me giving away light and love everywhere I go. I don't have nothing else to give, right? Ultimately, I know that feeds my spirit as much as it feeds a broken world. But what I also know, and that y'all didn't know, is at the same time, I've been going through prodigals. I've been going through my sons being disconnected. I've been going through fights and internally in my family. I've been dealing with this generational fallout personally. So I'm not talking about something that I haven't experienced. I'm talking about something that has, as Raquel and I have navigated through getting all 6 kids out of the house. Well, not quite. Jordan is 19 and in college, but out of that phase, as we've gone through that, we've been through all of the rigmarole, y'all. We just don't normally. We counseling other people. We're encouraging other people, but we've had everything you can think about happen inside of our family. We've had it, but I was always trying to figure out, right, what it was about this power that God gave me that nobody wanted. What it was about this strength and this energy that God gave me to pull me out of the spaces he pulled me out of, that it seemed like they didn't want. And I didn't understand the psychological side then. I didn't understand that 50-year window that we're living in that I'm talking about, that there was mechanisms in place that were bigger than one man's thoughts, right? And in a framework where many of the friends and even family members of my children did not have a two-parent household. The idea of a daddy with authority was one that was fundamentally something that was rejected. So I love even in the movies, you know what I'm saying, that he was able to not only come to his dad, I wish they would have had a better conversation, but that at the end, he was able to come back to his dad as well. But many of our children don't have that blessing. We don't weigh it enough. 70% of our African-American homes over the last 30 to 40 years have been primarily single-parent homes, primarily female-led single-parent homes, right? That's a reality that we're dealing with. Every statistic, whether it be the ACEs score or whether it be prison numbers and mental health issues, many of them lean on whether or not that foundation was there. So what happened over the last 50 years that yanked fathers out of that authoritative voice to where we have the men in place to begin to go back and put this under the subjection that God's order brings about, right? And I love the ladies. I ain't saying nothing against ladies. I love ladies. I've had some very strong ladies in my family, but I'm tired of y'all having to be strong. Let's be real. I'm tired of y'all having to fight. I'm tired of y'all having to carry a masculine energy to be able to parent boys that you were never supposed to carry, because the balance of Adam and Eve was something that God intended to be what we lived in. And I think because it was relational and because we were still dealing with our own issues and because we have so many things normalized in our society today, even though we've had every indicator telling us that family life is one of the number one disruptors of discipleship, of childhood development, of all of these things that make us whole and well and able to imagine and believe, even though family brokenness is the number one issue, most of us, in the name of our own personal emotions, have still justified splitting, separating, walking away, whatever it took to get our personal peace. And normally when we're trying to get our personal peace, we find ourselves missing out on the ones that are coming behind. So how did this heavy-handed? I ain't mean to get in my marriage and my what's the name? We'll get into that one. But I love the fact that his father was there and that relationship was showed, you guys, right? How do we get a handle on something when the order of the household is out of order, though? That's a big deal. And how do we begin to reinstill a full image of God inside of our children if both parties are not present? Both parties have to be present to give full value to the child. The father gives something to the daughter the same way the mother gives it. The mother gives something to the son the same way the father gives it. The balance of that is God's beautiful creation and the dance of development that is supposed to be our children. So in this situation, we see that heavy-handed faith. Daddy wasn't as heavy-handed as the sinners of an angry God, but he focused on his sin in that moment, not on the hole that was in his soul. He was saying something there about being free. He was saying something there about the weight of picking cotton every day. He was saying something there that his father, as a pastor, and he played both roles, right? But as father and pastor, he did not hear. And I believe part of the reason why we see so many of our children that are wayward today is because there were many fathers, just like myself, that because we were carrying over the rhythms from the previous generation, our children were taught to in ways that work for us, but never work for them. And many of those heavy-handed conversations are the ones that we've been unable to unravel because you see the children and you say something like, they just so soft today, right? But the truth is, you can't have 40 to 50 years of children raised without balance and not think that it's going to throw off their developmental balance. And so why would we look at them and expect the same strength from them when they didn't have the same foundations? And why aren't we measuring this on a regular basis when we engage with them, when we have conversations with them, and even trying to help them understand themselves a little bit more? These are just my questions. These are the beginnings. So we see this young man, his soul is crying out. He needs to get out. Daddy don't understand. And so he ends up walking away from daddy, even though daddy gave him some very good advice. Right? Daddy gave him some very good advice. He know it was hard to take. And them some of the other reasons why in this season, as you deal with a segment of our population, right, that has been raised primarily with a female voice, the idea of a daddy who's straightforward, who cuts to the core, right? Who tells you exactly that thing that might hurt your feelings is also a thing that's not very popular right now. So I love this piece. I love what it showed, right? But as we look into the broader, not just the family unit, but the overall, because even inside of families that are together, children are walking away from faith. Even in families where the mother and the father stay together, children are walking away from faith. Even in families where the mother and father stay together, parents don't feel adequate to disciple their children. And so, again, the foundation, our primary institution is the family. And so if the family institution no longer feels comfortable educating the seeds that God trusts us to co-create with him and develop, then that should be an alarm. We should be sounding alarm. Somebody should be ringing bells every day. The same way y'all do with all this dumb stuff that's on the internet, all these things that we have out there, somebody celebrity this and gossip that and fighting this and fight videos and all the different things that we do, entertainment with music, everything. And I'm not saying we don't all need an escape. That's what that young boy was looking for with the Jew joining the club. We all find ourselves not needing to be serious all the time, you know? And I know some of y'all don't think I had that time, but I do. It's at Prayer Mountain. It's normally when I'm meditating and thinking about ways that I'm going to come back and say some more stuff. But either way, I get my quiet time. Either there, I love to turn everything off when I'm driving. But being able to separate from that thing that you don't feel free from is a feeling everybody has. That's why the vices are so loud in this country. Kids are starting to gamble, you guys, in elementary school now. Most of us ain't paying attention because we don't watch what's going on their devices. But they full-on gambling junkies in 5th and 6th grade. 7th and 8th, 9th and 10th, it's already going on. They're getting together. They're doing parlays together. These things are real. We've normalized it just because we were already addicted to it. Huh? These things are real and they have consequences long-term. But right now, since I'm escaping, I'm going to make it okay for my kid to escape. Same thing with technology and the devices. Since I'm escaping, I'm going to make it okay for my kid to escape, right? And so we put something in their hands so they don't bother me and I can let them do what they need to do. These guys are what happens when we get caught in a system where we don't feel free. Everybody feels the need to escape. And we got a drugged up culture today. And I know y'all like to point out the weed and the drink, but the food and the online is just as addictive today as any of our chemical addictions. That whether it's alcohol, all the way up to heroin, you guys, I'm talking about the stiff stuff. That's why when y'all try to take them devices from them babies, they be ready to spaz out and hurt you over it. It's real life. That's why some of us are so deep into it, we don't even know how to unconnect them from that and don't know. We're seeing the signs that should tell us everything. Not only are we medicated on actual drugs, nicotine and THC and illicit drugs, but also food, which keeps us hyped up, the internet with the dopamine rushes that we get from the constant flickering from reel to reel. And so everybody's finding a way to escape, but we find ourselves shifting most of the blame towards our young people for the ways that they escape. And so we now have become that same individual at the beginning with their sermon, where we're pointing down to them instead of sitting in humility before God with them, saying we struggle too, and now let us all come together and walk in a better way with God. And that's the answer for the future, y'all. I'm telling you now, until you humble yourself, until you come down off that high horse, until you recognize that we are all sinners, even though we are not in the hands of an angry God, we're in the hands of a loving God, you guys, but we are all sinners saved by grace. We are sinners who have been born in sin, and the Bible says shapen in iniquity. And often we read words, but we don't get understanding. So when you get an understanding of the difference between sin and iniquity, and you add transgression in the middle of it, because that's where it goes, then you have a full understanding of the three scopes of sin that God is helping us to deal with as we learn to love God with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our body, our strength, our soul, right? And love our neighbor as ourselves, which is the only commandment, right? He says all the laws and the prophets are wrapped up in these. These words come straight from Jesus. So this ain't from nobody else. It's not an interpreter. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your strength, your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's some key flows right there, you guys, right? To understand that. But we're finding that not only are we finding it hard to love God with our whole heart, our whole mind, our whole body, but since we haven't, We find it very hard to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so we become heavy-handed with our faith. We get to the point to where we are now creating dysfunctional disciples. We get to the point to where they are now walking away, not from God, because if you'll look at the numbers, our Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they know the Bible better than most of these illiterate parents that have come before them. Technology and the access to information, one of the number one sellers is the Bible right now. So if they buy in the Bible more than their parents did, why they ain't coming to church more than their parents did? Sit with that. Bible says, Salah, pause, meditate on that. Right now, look it up. Don't believe me. These things are out there. Gen Z and millennials are buying the Bible at record rates, right? Compared to their parents that came before them. And yet they're attending church at lesser rates in most spaces. I've seen some upticks in spaces. I know some friends of mine, individuals that I've called brothers. I still call them brothers that are doing well in that young adult population. But what you'll find is that for many of those individuals that are coming in, they are the ones that walked away from a church that didn't fit them, right? Not necessarily rejected God or found themselves in, the bottoms or the pits, even though those stories are out there too. You definitely have those that are getting their conversions in prisons and on streets and all of those things. And I'm grateful I've gotten a chance to see many of those, but the numbers are not enough. The truth is,